you're seeing extraordinary turnout to your sessions around the country teaching about socialism. How do you explain it?
I think Americans are finally coming to terms with the fact that this isn't just another economic downturn, that this is a long, deep crisis, that there isn't an upturn around the corner despite all the talk about recovery. And they're asking questions like intelligent people would do. What's going on? Why is this happening? And then the big one, could we do better than this? And suddenly, since I deal with those questions, I'm in demand, and I won't deny there's an ego gratification here that is part of the story.
Well, it's pretty fascinating. I mean, I've been to a bunch of your monthly updates, which are live events in a church basement in New York City once a month. The crowd has done nothing but grow, at least this year, week after week. You've got hundreds of people cramming in that room to talk about what is socialism, what's happening in our economy, and what are some of the ways of understanding what's going on now that people are paying the attention that they are.
Well, I was hesitant, for example, to schedule a discussion of socialism, but so many people asked that I realized, okay, the taboo has been broken. It was unacceptable in America for most of the post-war period since 1945 to talk about this, because you had a kind of aroma that you were being unpatriotic, that you were not a lover of our country, and all of that kind of talk, which was effective. It shut people down, it freaked them out, it frightened them. And even at the end of the Cold War, when the big bugaboo of the Soviet Union had imploded on itself, it still seemed, decade after decade, it's been 25 years now, that it was still impossible. And then, with the crash of 2008, everything has changed.
Yeah. I mean, it is fairly significant that a man who has called himself for years an independent socialist is running for president of the United States, albeit on the Democratic Party ticket. What do you make of the Sanders candidacy?
I think it's the same phenomena as I'm encountering, that he realizes that there's two ways of saying it. Either the taboo against socialism has lifted, and I'm sure that that's part of what's going on. But the other part is all of the rest of American politics has moved several steps to the right, so that a man like Bernie Sanders is all that there is left of center that's running, and otherwise there'd be nobody, and he is looking to cash in on a gathering of people for whom everybody else is so problematic that he looks, by comparison, to be the right one.
So let's define a few terms. I mean, what's the difference between socialism in Western Europe, Northern Europe, and Venezuela and Cuba, say, Latin America?
Well, I think
is it the same animal?
It is and it isn't. You know, socialism has a long history, and it starts before Karl Marx, even though his name is associated with it. But I think the most important thing to understand is, from a relatively few people in a few parts of Europe calling themselves socialists, sort of at the end of the 18th, early 19th century, over the next 150 years, the thing spreads globally. That's an incredibly short time, historically, for an idea to become part of the life of every country on this planet. And if things go that quickly, then there's no alternative but to see people interpreting it differently, depending on their own religions, their own cultures, their own histories, what Cubans mean by socialism, what Venezuelans mean, what Swedes mean, what Nigerians mean. That couldn't possibly be the same. They don't interpret Christianity the same. They don't interpret almost anything the same. And I think there you find the explanation for why the word socialism is, on the one hand, so very attractive to people, and yet so differently interpreted.
Now, there is that word social right there in the middle, and that has something to do with it, right?
Absolutely.
What?
Well, you know, the early critics of capitalism, I'm going to take a step back. Every system like capitalism, whether it's slavery or feudalism or any other systems we've had as our economic arrangements, have always had people who loved them and people who felt we could do better. There's nothing new about a criticism of capitalism. It was part of the birth of that system itself. And the people who were critical, who weren't happy about how capitalism was evolving already in the 19th century, looked around for a word, because that's part of the problem. How do we capture in a word what we don't like about capitalism? And the word, there were many candidates, but the one that ended up being in people's minds the way to grasp that idea was to say, in capitalism, everybody is for himself, herself as an individual. Put the community out of your mind, put the collectivity out of your mind.
Margaret Thatcher famously said there is no such thing as community,
Absolutely.
only
You're
individual.
on your own. You're on your own goal. You're going to build yourself. We're all for ourselves. It's Adam Smith. If we all do what's good for us individually, it'll somehow magically work out to be the best for everybody. Socialists were the people who always said, no, 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 no. That's nutty. If you want the community to be good, if you want the society you live in to be good, you have to work at that. That has to be part of what you care about, what you give yourself to. If you give yourself only to yourself, you will end up maybe being rich, but you will be the loneliest person on the planet. And the criticisms of capitalism settled around this word. We're not individualists. We are committed to a good community, a good society. We are socialists.